Alright guys, you're about to learn everything you need to know about beat mixing and vocal mixing in one video. I actually had one of our top producers, Nick, dive through one of the tracks we made for Solstice, and he's going to show you from the ground up how to really get the best mixes on your beats. And everything he's using in this video is actually from our Solstice production suite, and that's going to be dropping on Friday, June 14th. So if you want to get access to over 330 melodies, not to mention a bunch of other great samples that's really going to help you get the best mixes, make sure you get on that wait list. There will be a link in the description, and there's also a free version, so check it out in the description. Anyways, enjoy this video.
Hey guys, this is Nick with Cymatics, and in this video we're going to be discussing the topic of mixing, specifically in the context of hip-hop, because a lot of people struggle with getting a good mix down and getting their track to sound professional and radio ready, so to speak, and understandably so, because it's a pretty complicated subject. There's a lot of moving parts, and it only takes experience and working on a lot of tracks to get the hang of the ropes and to actually develop techniques that you end up using a lot. I mean, that kind of becomes your style. There are some certain foundational tips that I want to give in analyzing this song, because this song also contains vocals, and vocals can be a pretty complicated area of mixing as well, because it tends to be the most prominent part of the song, and when it's poorly recorded or poorly treated in the mixing stage, it tends to tank the entire song, and the song gets written off as unprofessional. So to get vocals right is kind of the most important when you have a vocal track in the mix. So this is a track from the Solstice demo mix, and it's totally dry, it's got no effects, and it's in a bit of a shoddy state right now, but we're going to try to make some major changes. We're going to kind of approach everything not very analytically, not paying attention to the details, because actually a lot of the, mixing does concern itself with details, but the most important changes in a mix are the ones that are the broadest, and the big fader movements that you do in the very beginning, which is the balance of the mix, that's going to be the most important, and everything else becomes detail. So when you approach your mix, the first thing you want to think about is the first gut instinct moves you make are probably going to be, they're going to encompass 80% of the whole mix, and the remaining 20% is just going to be details like EQ, compression, all that stuff. But the most important thing is going to be adjusting the levels and the balance. So let's listen to this track. Again, it's got vocals, so I want you to pay attention to the balance, namely where are the instruments sitting? Is one thing louder than the other? What are the most important instruments in this mix that you want to be telling the story of the song?
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass, don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8, they think I'm crazy, cruising down on base, they gotta pay me up.
That's a pretty solid introduction, and just one pass over the track should start to give you ideas as to what are the deficiencies, what is kind of underwhelming, or what are some of the parts that sound overwhelming. And when we mix, we want to try and equalize all of that so that everything is kind of compact and nothing is jumping out. And the first thing that I kind of hear is the vocal is too quiet in the basic volume sense. So if we bring up the volume, we're going to try and make it the most dominant part of the song, and we're not going to think too much about EQ or the tone of the vocal or anything like that, or effects. We definitely need to add some effects, but I just want to get the loudness of the main vocal right.
I don't do no dance.
Now, the vocal has to be loud, but in reference to what? Well, typically it's going to be in reference to the drums and the 808, but also you want to take into account the actual melody. So if we take out everything, or rather if we just take out the melody and listen to the track without the melody.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass, don't try to catch.
So how does that sound over the drums?
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass, don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8.
Alright, so let's bring in the melody.
I don't do no dance, don't do romance.
So off the bat, I think we can reduce the volume of the melody.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass.
Now we're going to start to make some adjustments to the drums, and I'm going just by gut. So the clap, off the bat, I want to bring the clap up.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass, don't try to catch.
Alright, how's the 808 doing? Let's take the 808 out.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass, don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8, they think I'm crazy, cruising down on base, they gotta pay me up.
The kick in this case actually sounds quite nice. I can hear that the kick is penetrating through the bass of the 808 in a way that I don't have to wrestle with it too much. Now, in the cases where you do have to wrestle with it, the best approach would just be to replace the kick sample with something else, but I can also show you some tricks. But before that, let's first try volume. So the nice thing is about this particular kick is that over each 808 note, it sounds very solid, and it sounds like it's part of the 808 itself. That's not always what you want to achieve, but in this case, it sounds very pillowy. It's almost as though the kick is kind of meant to fit with the 808. So one thing you always want to check, regardless of whether or not you think it sounds good, is to check how it does sound with the inverted phase. So you want to load a plugin like a utility and invert the phase of the left and right channel. So right off the bat, I can tell that the percussiveness of the kick is more apparent when the phase inversion is off, so when it's playing normally. And I always try to keep, by the way, I try to keep everything playing in context, so the vocal included. In this case, I'll take out the vocal just so you can hear it better, but in general, that's not a habit you should really rely on, especially using the solo button. I think should just be illegal when you're doing a mix in many cases, unless you're trying to fix this very specific mistake, which we will also, I'll show you one or two tools to use when it comes to vocals. But in general, the solo button, you should stay away from that. So compare this kick to this one when I invert the phase. Again. You can hear that the bass of this kick is a lot more grounded than inverting it. So you always have to make that check. Finally, what you want to play with is the transposition of the kick. If you're having issues with your kick kind of disappearing on certain 808 notes, you definitely want to use the transpose function here to pick a pitch of the kick that kind of satisfies all of the notes, or as many notes as possible. That sounds pretty cool actually at a -2. So you can hear right away at -1 what happens to the kick on this second 808 note. Listen to this relationship. Let's solo the kick in the 808 here. So to my ear, this kick kind of disappears on this note compared to this. And now it sounds very woody and boxy. So let's use the original pitch and compare again. Nice. Let's try -2. Nice. So to me, it's between -2 and 0. -2 could be nice, but I think it's solid on 0. So one thing I want to do is, first of all, let's bring the kick up this project and just set it near the 808 so that we can kind of work between. Alright, so there's a bit of a boxiness on the second note. Let's solo the kick and to hear if the boxiness is present. So the boxiness is indeed present. It's not an 808 issue, because the 808 doesn't really have much information that'll conflict with the kick. So let's bring up an EQ. Let's go to EQ, and I'm gonna get Pro Q3. Now we'll solo this just to demonstrate where we are, where this issue is that I'm hearing. This is kind of where I'm hearing it. Now you can do like an isolation and isolate individual peaks like this. But a lot of times that can be counterproductive, because what happens is you tend to over-isolate and overcut a lot of important frequencies that actually contribute a lot to the tone of the kick. And once you remove a lot of them, the kick will sound very hollow. So in general, I would advise against kind of very surgical cuts like this, unless you know what you're doing. But in general, I would more so kind of gravitate towards broader EQ strokes. And also, you should be very kind of careful with the amount of reduction you're doing. So I wouldn't really be going past 3 dB in many cases. Alright, so let's now play this in conjunction with the 808. So you can tell that cutting away just a bit of that boxiness. It kind of makes the kick gel a bit more naturally with the 808. Apart from that, I would say that the 808 itself is also very subby. It's got a huge amount of sub, which is nice, but I would say that when you play it on a big system, you might hear a little bit of too much rumbling. Now, I'm not going to do any kind of high passing. What I want to do is just a very subtle shelf. And I'm not even going to use the Q to do anything like this. It'll just be very subtle. A lot of times this can be enough, like 1.5 dB. This can be enough to relieve a lot of that pressure that happens when you have an 808 that's the subby. And also the kick will start to kind of sing right through. And the effect can be quite dramatic, even with very small reduction. Let me just quickly move this over like so, so it doesn't click. Alright, let's go before and after with the EQ. Alright. Alright, now I'm making slight adjustments to the balance. Alright, now let's go piece by piece. This hi-hat roll has quite an aggressive peak here. Right there, so we want to reduce it a tiny amount. Alright, we have this percussion that I want to bring up. This percussion is also a bit dull. Oh, nice. I already have something here. Let's bring up the high end of the percussion here. Right now I'm just kind of making sure that the balance of everything is set before I move on to kind of effects. One thing you'll notice is when you remove the bass is that the sample itself, without the 808, has quite a bit of low end. That's not something I want conflicting with the 808, and you can see there's a lot of activity here. So I would actually go ahead and just low cut that away. You can tell how subby that is. It really has no right competing with our 808. So cutting that away is actually a good idea. You can see there's a lot of movement here, but that's not something I'm concerned with yet. Let's bring the 808 back in. Let's take that cowbell. It's a bit aggressive. I'm gonna pan it the other way. And I also find that it can use some reverb because it's a bit dry on its own. So let's go ahead and add a bit of reverb to this. Okay, that's nice. Alright, so for reverb, we want to reduce the low end of the reverb. This is something you want to do with all of your reverb sounds because, you know, when you have sub information in the reverb, it's going to be quite muddy. And also reduce the bass multiplier here. I'm using Vintage Verb, by the way. This is a pretty popular reverb plugin that many people use, and it's quite good. And really, I'm just going to adjust the decay of the reverb to just resolve itself a little bit earlier than it is now. Okay, we're getting this sound here, which we can definitely do a little bit of work with EQ. Let's bring out the EQ. Let's not use the solo button. Alright, so the most important thing I think we can apply here is a little bit of chorusing. So you can just use the basic chorus of your plugin, or of your DAW. What that's going to do is it's going to kind of wash out the high frequencies here. You can hear what it's doing. It's kind of smearing everything. I don't want it to be too strong. I just want it to just kind of smear these very shrill high frequencies. Let's try before. After. Alright, let's do the same thing with reverb. Let's bring some vintage verb. One thing we can do is group this. You could do this as a send and return track as well, but I just in Ableton Live you can just group things. So then you can go to the vintage verb and set this to 100% wet, which it is, and then you just add another track that's dry. So you get just the wet version and the dry version. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to hear the reverb sound. If you notice, without the reverb sound, this sound is panned quite a bit to the left. Let's actually pan it back to the left. Now one trick you can do is to pan the reverb sound to the right, so that it sounds kind of balanced. So you can just move this to the right, like so. Now the reverb is just playing on the right, and the dry signal is playing on the left. And we can also kind of adjust the reverb sound on its own, because it's separated. We can add an EQ. And just cut away a little bit of the mid-range of that. Let's listen to that in context. Gotta make sure to play with this. Alright, now let's bring back the vocals.
I don't do no dancing, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think
Alright, now I can bring the vocal back down.
I don't do no dancing, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy, cruising down on base.
Alright, now as soon as I bring the vocal back in, I'm hearing stuff that's conflicting. So the cowbell, for example, it has the issue that it conflicts with the vocals. So I'm going to do the exact same trick. I'm going to set the cowbell reverb onto a separate track as the dry cowbell. I'm going to adjust the volume of that, like so. And then I'm going to EQ the reverb independently to get rid of this resonance.
Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm
going to boost the high end a bit.
Not gonna let you pass, not gonna let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy, cruising down on base. They gotta pay me up. I got them stressed, gotta collect, I get respect, I gotta flex, I gotta text, I gotta jet.
Okay, that's coming together quite nicely. I can reduce the volume of this reverb thing again. let's get to the vocal. And we have to do a bit of processing on this this vocal to get it to sound proper. The first thing I'm hearing is that I would love to hear a delay, and we got to make sure the delay is set to the right tempo. You can do it with syncing it up. I'm using Valhalla delay. Again, it's a very kind of basic delay, but it's got a lot of interesting features. And I tend to have it on tape, but you can also set it to digital. In fact, let's probably use the digital so it has none of that coloration of the tape. Okay, so delay is one of those things that you got to treat very carefully. When it comes to vocals, you can hear right away it's way too loud. So when you use delay, again, it's a very good idea to separate it into its own thing. So I'm going to use Command G or Control G on PC and just group it so that it's 100% wet. This is just making a send return or send and return. And we have the original kind of dry track. And what this lets me do is it lets me adjust all the parameters of the delay. First, let's bring it down. Okay, let's bring the era up to the future. You can see that when it's on the past mode, it's got a big cutoff at 10K. Let's play with that ourselves. We don't have to have the plugin do that for us. Right away, you can hear those high-end frequencies come back. All right, let's do a little bit of. Okay. And we can be very creative with how we filter stuff. Now that we have an independent control of the delay, we can be a lot more precise. Okay, to prevent the delay from getting in the way of the original vocal, what I want to do is actually take the lead, let's call this lead vocal, and I'm going to sidechain compress the delay signal itself, now that it's separated, with the dry vocal that it is actually treating. So you can see I'm going to find the lead vocal here. I have to make sure it's pre-effects so that it's not sidechaining itself post-effects. Let's bring down the threshold. This way, every time the vocal plays, it's going to duck the delay so that the delay will not get in the way of the vocal itself. So you can hear that the vocal is a lot more clear when it's playing over top of the delays, because the delays are physically getting out of the way of the vocal. So let's listen to the before and after here.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to.
Very muddy.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8.
Nice. So the speed at which it goes up and down in reaction to the vocal is determined by the attack and release parameters. So if you find that the delay is coming up too fast, the release might be too low. So if you listen to this, it can be a little bit obnoxious.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't.
If we bring it up even more.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass.
You can see it's trying to, by the line, it's trying to like force itself in between the individual words. And that's a little bit too erratic. So you want to slow down that release. You want to smoothen it out a little bit so that it actually has time to breathe when the vocal disappears from the sidechain detector.
I don't do no dance.
Now the line is a lot smoother.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8.
Okay.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy, cruising down on base. They gotta pay me up. I got 'em straight.
Okay. Let's bring down the release a little bit. Let's make sure we're controlling it a bit more.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy, cruising down on base. They gotta pay me up. I got 'em stressed, gotta collect, I get respect, I gotta flex, I gotta text, I gotta jet. I don't be running the coupe, I just be spending the loop. I don't do regular 2 and them choppers on
Okay, that's sounding quite nice. I'm also gonna add a mid-side EQ onto this delay. I can hear there's a lot of kind of lower body on, you can hear on the sides on the stereo channel. It's a little bit chunky, but it's only chunky in the stereo field. So in Pro Q3, you can actually independently set the points themselves to mid or side or stereo. I want it just to control the side. You can hear how much beef there is there. Okay, now we're hearing a little bit of resonance, so let's bring out Soothe, which is a very key plugin. Let's listen to what it wants to hear. I just be spinning the loop. I don't do regular two, and them choppers don't stop when I tell them to let it shit loose. You hear that right there. Alright, so now we disable listen mode. So you can see how much control we have over just the delay sound, and that's just to make sure that the vocal is always clear. That sounds much nicer. Let's try it after that. Nice thing is you can save this now as a rack. So let's close this. I accidentally put it on one of the lead tracks, but I want to put it on the lead bus. And let's enable Soothe now. And we can also reduce the feedback a bit, so it doesn't linger so long. Alright, let's listen to everything in context here.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy.
Alright, you can see there's still a lot going on here. I'm actually going to go for this particular dot. I'm going to set its placement to stereo, and I'm going to reduce this build-up.
I don't do no dance, don't do romancing, I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch, doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy, cruising down on beige. They gotta pay me up.
Alright, so now the delay sounds like it's, perfectly fits in the pocket. And you can notice that, this took quite a bit of time and quite a bit of setup, but a lot of mixing is a lot of incremental changes. This is what I'm talking about in terms of the details, being kind of the last 20%. You might not hear the differences if you, before and after it, but I'm sure you probably would if let's try this without.
They think I'm crazy, cruising down on beige. They gotta pay me up.
So without all this delay treatment, let's disable this just to hear the delay by itself.
They think I'm crazy, cruising down on beige. They gotta pay me up.
So that's getting in the way of the vocal dramatically, but after all these incremental changes that we made.
They think I'm crazy, cruising down on beige. They gotta pay me up.
Okay, I have another little idea that I want to use with the...
They gotta pay me up.
Just with this particular moment.
Me up.
I'm gonna actually just copy and paste this entire track. We're gonna delete this and this. And I just want to do a throw.
They gotta pay me up.
But we're gonna go here.
Me up.
We're gonna click warp. We're going to set the pitch to +12. We're going to set it to complex pro so the formants are roughly similar. Okay, let's separate it from the rest of the stuff because it's just going to be used as an effect. But I'm going to copy and paste the rack. We're going to cut the dry. So we're only hearing delay. And then we're going to probably change the timing, but let's try it out.
Pay me up. Me up.
Maybe we can do it even later. Oh, that's nice.
Pay me up. I got 'em stressed up. Pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
That's pretty cool.
Pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect. Pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
That's pretty cool. We can also do some creative distortion that kind of comes up behind this delay. So if we put the distortion actually right before this delay,
Pay me up.
we can actually, let's reduce the output. And we can also make the filtering a bit more aggressive. You're gonna get that kind of weekend sound. And it might be nice.
Pay me up. I got 'em stressed me up. I got 'em. Gotta pay me up.
Alright, let's also play with the timing of the delay. Let's set it to milliseconds.
Me up. Me up. Me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect. Pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
Alright, let's play with the formants a bit.
Me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
That's nice.
Pay me up. Me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
That's pretty fire.
I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
And I want to control this a bit more as well. So now that we have so much distortion, let's use a higher strength, higher slope.
Pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect. I get respect. I gotta flex. I gotta text.
Alright, finally we need to do a bit of processing to the ad-libs.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch.
Right away we can tell that the ad-libs are a bit out of control. What we need to do is just drown it in reverb. So let's pull up reverb. In this case, I might even just go 100% wet, make the decay quite high, and let's just see how that sounds like.
Don't do romance. I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing.
Okay, now that we have, we're at 100% wet, we can just use an EQ to control exactly what we want.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing.
I also want to reduce the high end a bit.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing.
Let's let in a little bit of the drive-through.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch. Doing 30.
Okay,
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch. Doing 30 in a A.
okay, let's go back to our delay. It's very iterative, as you can see. Let's make sure that the delay is not inflicting whatsoever with our vocal. Let's bring down the delay level a bit more.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do.
Why did I do that? Because you can tell now that the ad-libs are coming in, now the delay has another thing to compete with. So we want to make sure that we're controlling everything as new elements are being brought in. Let's listen to this independently. We can hear there's a lot of rumbling, even though we high-passed. Let's use another more strict high-pass here. And we have this resonance, which we can control with soothe. And we can actually cut out everything below this frequency as well. Alright.
30 in a A. They think I'm crazy. 30 in a A. They think I'm crazy. Cruising down on beige. They gotta pay me up. I got 'em stressed. Gotta collect.
Let's try and add a phaser to this. Just to make it a bit washed out. Last thing I'm going to do here is add a tiny bit of compression using the 1176. I'm going to put the 1176 obviously ahead of all of the spatial effects that we did.
I don't do no dance.
And
I don't do no dance. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass.
I don't want to do too much compression,
I don't do no dance.
because the vocal is already quite compressed as is. It's quite evenly delivered.
Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch. Doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy. Cruising down on base. They gotta pay me up.
And finally, I want to do a little bit of RX mouth declick. It's a very useful plugin that literally just takes away the clicks you can get
I don't do.
on a vocal delivery. So let's listen to just the clicks
I
themselves.
don't do no dance.
It's always funny to listen to that. Very ASMR-like, but it can really help cut out those annoying pops.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I don't do no dancing. Don't do romance.
It's a lot better.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch. Doing.
And the final bit of processing that I want to do to this vocal is specifically geared towards controlling those resonances at about 4K using Soothe again. And I'm going to add Soothe after everything here. Technically, the correct thing would be to put it before the delay, after the compressor, or even before the compressor, because the compressor will react to our processed kind of resonance treated vocal, and it'll be more accurate in responding with the needle to our new kind of processed and treated vocal. But before I go on to that, let's just first listen to what I'm talking about. If we play this track,
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch. Doing 30.
there's quite a lot of activity in that S region,
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romance.
and that's going to be around 4K. Now let's engage Soothe, and we're going to use this listen button again to
I don't do no dancing.
audition these frequencies that I'm talking about.
Don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass.
Right there.
Don't try to catch. Doing 30.
All right, let's bring it back in.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing.
Now make sure we need to do this in context of the mix, but I'm just doing this to demonstrate the before and after. So let's play the vocal without Soothe.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass.
Okay, and after.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass me.
Now make sure not to overdo it, because you're going to lose the personality and the character of the vocal. The 4K region is actually very important to understanding and perceiving the words. So if you cut away too much, it's going to be quite detrimental to the quality of the vocal. But if you do it carefully, and this is what Soothe is best at, you can actually get rid of some of these harsh moments in the vocal and keep the overall legibility the same. If you control resonances like this, you're actually going to get away with a lot louder of a mix, because if you push this into a limiter, what's going to happen is all these peaks that are peeking out from the track, from the vocal track, they're going to hit the limiter first, and they're going to start to clip and distort in a very ugly way. And that clipping and distortion is actually going to affect the entire song. Whereas if you take away those resonances just to control them, you're going to have a more balanced and evenly distributed distortion that kind of distorts everything in the same amount. Whereas if you have something that's super loud and peaky, that thing is going to distort first, and actually it's going to ruin the rest of the tracks that are underneath it. Let's first listen to how this sounds with Soothe on.
I don't do no dancing. Don't do romancing. I can't let you pass. Don't try to catch. Doing 30 in a 8. They think I'm crazy. Cruising down on base.
Where he says they think I'm crazy, it's kind of very easy to hear how much activity there is at 4K.
They think I'm crazy. They think I'm crazy.
It's a lot more balanced. We can take away the high cut.
They think I'm crazy. They think I'm crazy. They think I'm crazy. Cruising down on base.
That area used to be very annoying if we remove this.
I got them stressed, gotta collect, I get respect, I gotta flex, I gotta text, I gotta jet.
There's a lot of sibilance there.
I got them stressed, gotta collect, I get respect, I gotta flex, I gotta text, I gotta jet. I don't be running the coupe, I just be spinning the loop. I don't do regular two and them choppers don't stop when I tell them to let it shit loose. I got them stressed, gotta collect, I get respect, I gotta flex, I gotta text, I gotta jet. I don't be running the coupe, I just be spinning the jet. I don't be running the coupe, I just be spinning the loop. I don't do regular two and them choppers don't stop when I tell them to let it shit loose.
Finally, we had this little triangle, which has a lot of very annoying high frequencies. We can use this, not so much that you cut away the entire point of it. Let's go here and then use another bell. This is where I would advocate that doing a surgical cut is actually a very good idea because we only have so many frequencies to play with.
I don't do no dancing, don't do romance.
Okay, so I think that's a far cry in a way from where we started. Brought everything up to balance. Kind of want to bring back some of that boxiness
I don't do no
from the kick.
I got them stressed, gotta collect, I get respect, I gotta flex, I gotta text, I gotta jet. I don't be running the coupe, I just be spinning the loop. I don't do regular two and them choppers don't stop when I tell them to let it shit loose.
Alright, finally let's bring up Pro L2. This is going to be on the master. And I'm going to set something like the punchy algorithm here. I'm going to set look ahead to 0. You can keep true peak limiting on, the transient linking to 100%. These values are going to set how the limiter is kind of reacting. A high attack is going to essentially be a clipper. And the lower the attack, the more, I guess the dynamics are going to be controlled ahead of the actual clipping stage more aggressively if you have a lower attack value. I like to set it on dynamic as well for just the drums to sound better. Now we can kind of drive the whole mix quite loud because we were paying attention to the dynamics and the balance, because if the balance is too lopsided in one way or the other, whether it's too much bass or too much high end, too much mid range, when you start to limit, typically the first thing that's going to give out is whatever is the loudest element in the mix. And as long as everything is appropriately balanced, you'll be able to drive quite a lot of gain into a clipper and it's going to sound fine for more input gain. Whereas if you have way too much bass, the first thing that's going to disappear is the bass. Okay, that sounds a lot more leveled. It sounds a lot more professional from my point of view, at least, than from where we started. And I think generally the principles have been fairly simple to grasp, which is just begin the mix with a strong balance. So make sure that you balance all your faders properly. You got to pick the elements you think are going to be the most important. In this case, it's of course the vocal. Then you're going to adjust your kick and 808 to make sure that they interact well, and if they don't interact well, I gave you some tips, namely playing with the pitch, playing with the phase inversion to make sure that you're getting good phase coherence, and then finally you should kind of just replace the drum sample with something else. If you're having issues in that department, it's a lot better to just use a better kick. Then we went over some minor things regarding the melody. Always kind of control the low end, make sure you're not leaking too much sub from the melody itself, because you have an 808 for that reason. You don't need to have sub in the melody. And also make sure your mid-range is controlled when it comes to the melody itself, because when you have a vocal, you're going to have a lot of problems there, but in this case, we don't have that much of an issue. The other thing is obviously spatial effects, delay, reverb. I did quite a bit of work just to show that if you use a vocal delay, you want to make sure that it's not interfering with the original vocal, that you can't just kind of throw a delay on. Sometimes you can, but in general, it's kind of hard to throw a delay onto something and it not interfere with the original material. And in order to avoid that, you want to use some sidechain compression, you want to use some filtering, and make sure that you're doing everything separately to the delay itself, set to 100% wet. That way you're able to do interesting creative effects like here. It's a pretty cool effect. Hope you guys learned something and enjoyed this, and thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
I don't